By all accounts, Lewis was a child who any parent would be so proud to call their son. A top student, he ranked in the highest 1% of his age group nationwide. He was a prize-winning mathematical contestant, a budding writer who reported for the youth section of his local newspaper, and an experienced actor who regularly appeared in community stage and television productions. He already had a touch of national fame, having appeared in a television commercial at age 7 with the late NASCAR legend Dale Earnhardt. Lewis was born with his breastbone sunken into the chest cavity, a condition called pectus excavatum. The condition affects as many as 1 in 500 children, and some doctors believe it may interfere with the ability of the lungs to expand fully if not corrected, and might lead to respiratory problems later on. Lewis's parents saw an article in the local newspaper that described in glowing terms a new surgical procedure to correct the defect. In this procedure, a metal bar is inserted through 3 small incisions in the chest, and the bar props up the breastbone. The article described the surgery as an advance over surgery that requires the opening of the whole chest cavity and indicated that most patients have a quick and easy recovery. Lewis and his parents spoke to the surgeon at the hospital affiliated with the state's prestigious medical school about the surgery. Having confidence in the reputation of both hospital and surgeon, they decided to go ahead with the procedure. His mom, Helen, noted in the journal that she wrote in after Lewis's death, quote, "We thought it was like getting braces." The surgery was on Thursday and took much longer than Lewis's parents had anticipated. After surgery, Lewis was given pain medication through an epidural in his back. In addition, he was given regular injections of a powerful painkiller that was labeled with warning signs in bold print about the possibility of perforated ulcers, bleeding, and kidney failure, a sign that any patient taking the medication should be closely monitored. From the recovery room, Lewis was moved to the children's cancer ward because no beds were available in the children's surgical ward. Lewis's doctor had the weekend off, but another surgeon checked with Lewis on Saturday morning, 2 days after his surgery. This was the last seasoned physician who would see Lewis until his death 2 days later. He noted no evidence of infection and said that Lewis was doing well enough to get out of bed. Early Sunday morning, Lewis was suddenly stricken by overwhelming pain in his stomach, the worst pain imaginable, he told his mother. Helen called in a nurse who told her that it was just gas pain, and even though the boy claimed his pain was 5 out of 5, the nurse said he just needed to get up and walk around. Later, another nurse suggested a bath. At the nurse's insistence, Lewis, supported on either side by his mother and the nurse, took a very painful walk around the floor, with Lewis stopping every few steps. Only later would Lewis's family know that the pain was the first warning sign of a perforated duodenal ulcer, a known and stated risk of the powerful medication he was given. The ulcer was eating a hole in his upper intestine, allowing toxic fluids to flow into his abdominal cavity. By Sunday afternoon, Lewis was beginning to show signs of incipient shock, a life-threatening medical emergency caused by loss of blood and infection. The boy's belly was bloated, his pulse was rising, his temperature had dropped, and he was pale and weak, dripping with cold sweat. The nurse continued to insist that Lewis was not walking enough to rid himself of gas pain, and they took another agonizing walk and then another bath. But for most of the afternoon, Helen said, I just hunched over the bed, with Lewis gripping my hand in pain. Helen repeatedly asked the nurses to call the doctor to examine her son. Each time, instead of a full-fledged doctor, an exhausted-looking first-year resident arrived. Finally, Helen demanded that either the nurse call the original surgeon, or the doctor who examined Lewis on Saturday morning, or one of the other partners on call. The nurse was exasperated, and the resident clearly was offended. Helen wrote in her journal later, "She is offended and appeared extremely downcast that I have questioned her judgment. I feel bad for her. But to stand my ground, I reiterated Lewis's alarming symptoms once again. She stands at the computer and nods glumly, but never says a word. My impression is that she's too angry to speak." Apparently, no seasoned doctor was ever called. On Sunday evening, hours after Helen's request, another young doctor arrived. Helen assumed that this was a veteran doctor as she requested. In fact, he was another resident, a fourth-year resident, and he has more training and experience than the neophyte first-year resident, but is still under the supervision of a seasoned physician. Again, Lewis's mom was told that the excruciating abdominal pain is from constipation due to the pain medications. The resident recorded a heart rate of 80 beats per minute, but a nurse who took the boy's pulse 10 minutes earlier had recorded it elevated at 126 beats per minute. The results of a blood test that came back around midnight showed the first signs of a deadly imbalance that can shut down the body's vital organs. Lewis's mom noted, quote, "No one puts these clues together." The critical blood tests, those that would check for infection and blood loss, were not performed. That night, Lewis's heart rate soared to 142 beats per minute. His temperature dropped to 95 degrees. Helen wrote in her journal, quote, "Neither Lewis nor I slept at all Sunday night. I have given up on the weekend staff and am waiting for the morning when the regular staff and doctors arrive. But their arrival simply brings confusion. Nothing is coordinated. No one seems to be in charge of the care." Despite his alarming symptoms, Lewis had received no special monitoring during the night. Then on Monday morning, an aide taking routine vital signs was unable to get a blood pressure reading. They tried repeatedly with an assortment of blood pressure cuffs, believing they could not get a reading because the devices were all suddenly broken. His mother says, quote, "No one seemed concerned that this might be an emergency requiring immediate action." Finally, on the 7th blood pressure cuff, a second-year resident thought she detected a reading of 110/58. The staff, now satisfied, had something to write down in the boy's chart. A sign of massive internal bleeding stemming from the perforated ulcer was missed. That morning, Lewis's pain in his abdomen suddenly stops. The nurse thinks this is a positive sign. In fact, in a situation such as this, sudden cessation of abdominal pain can be a sign of imminent death. Meanwhile, Lewis catches a glimpse of himself in the mirror and says, "My God, I'm the same color as the sheets," his mother Helen wrote. Later that fateful Monday morning, Lewis told his mom that the world was going black. In the last thing he ever said, quote, "Ish going black." It's going black. He repeats it again and then passes out. His mother wrote, quote, "Suddenly, Lewis is dead. It's 12:05 p.m. His father and little sister are watching in horror from the back of the room. I run out of the room crying for help. I've never seen someone die before, much less my own perfectly healthy child." The fourth-year resident appeared again, and when he couldn't revive the boy, he called a code, a full alert for a patient that is in imminent danger of dying. Residents, and finally seasoned physicians, streamed into the room. But of course by then it was too late. After trying to revive Lewis for an hour and a half, the doctors pronounced him dead, 31 hours after his symptoms began. When Lewis's parents called family members to tell them what happened, they described his symptoms over 24 hours. Helen wrote, quote, "My cousin, an internist, suspected a perforated ulcer or sepsis. My brother, an attorney, looks up the symptoms in the Mayo Handbook and he independently reached the same conclusion. The autopsy results reported the same diagnosis. 3 liters of blood and other fluids were found in Lewis's abdomen. A boy of his age only had 4 to 5 liters of blood to lose. A subsequent review of Lewis's case concluded that there had been many clear indications of the gravity of Lewis's condition, and that the nurses and residents should have summoned an experienced doctor at any one of many points throughout the boy's ordeal. If they had done so, a simple blood test would have shown the infection and internal bleeding that led to his death. An experienced physician who reviewed Lewis's medical record was quoted as saying, "Even a Boy Scout could have done better. It's hard to kill a healthy 15-year-old."